So you're holding your phone watching this video. You probably know who Steve Jobs is, or at least you've heard of him. You know Thomas Edison and the light bulb. These are the big names, the titans of invention we learn about in school. But what about the foundational technologies? The things so fundamental, so deeply embedded in our daily lives that we don't even think about them as inventions anymore. My name is Albert, and welcome to Unknown Facts. If that sounds interesting, and you enjoy peeling back the layers of history to find the surprising truths underneath, then definitely consider hitting that subscribe button and giving this video a like. It really helps the channel out, and you won't want to miss what we have coming up next. Alright, let's start with arguably one of the most iconic inventions of all time, the wheel. It's so fundamental we use the phrase reinventing the wheel to describe a pointless task. When you picture the first wheel, you might imagine a caveman, maybe chipping away at a stone disc to haul a mammoth. But the reality is much more recent and much more complex. The earliest evidence we have for the wheel comes from Mesopotamia, around 3500 BC. And here's the twist. It was a potter's wheel. It was used for craftsmanship, for creating symmetrical pottery with a level of precision that was impossible before. The idea of putting a wheel on its side and attaching it to an axle to create a cart or a chariot came later. This leap from a stationary tool to a dynamic component of motion was the real game changer. But who made that leap? We have absolutely no idea. Next up is something even more fundamental than the wheel. It's not so much an invention as it is a discovery, a harnessing of a natural force fire. We know that early humans, our ancestors like Homo erectus, were using fire as far back as 1.5 million years ago. But there's a huge difference between opportunistically using fire from a lightning strike and knowing how to create it on demand. That control is what separates us, and it's a discovery with no single author. It revolutionized our diet, as cooking food not only made it safer to eat by killing parasites, but also made nutrients more bioavailable, which some scientists believe contributed to the development of our larger brains. Now let's talk about how we found our way across the vast, featureless oceans. The invention of the compass completely changed the game for navigation. Before the compass, sailors were reliant on the sun, the stars, and familiar coastlines. Venturing into the open ocean was incredibly risky. One cloudy night could mean you were hopelessly lost. The basic principle of the magnetic compass was first discovered in China during the Han Dynasty, around the 2nd century BC. But, just like the wheel, it wasn't initially for navigation. The first compasses were south pointers used for feng shui and divination. Who was the first sailor or ship captain who looked at that south-pointing ladle and thought, "Hey, I could use this to know which way is which, even when I can't see the North Star? We have no clue." Think about how you're getting this information right now. You're reading text on a screen. Before screens, it was text on paper. Before paper, information was recorded on heavy, expensive, or fragile materials like clay tablets, papyrus, or parchment made from animal skins. The traditional story credits a Chinese court official named Kai Lun with inventing paper in 105 AD. The history books say he presented his new invention to the emperor, detailing a process of mashing up mulberry bark, hemp, old rags, and fishnets into a pulp. But here's the thing with history. It's rarely that simple. More recent archaeological discoveries have unearthed fragments of paper from sites in China that date back to as early as the 2nd century BC, a full 200 years before Kai Lun. If paper was the hardware, then the printing press was the operating system that allowed information to be copied and distributed at an unprecedented scale. Before the printing press, every book had to be copied by hand by a scribe. It was a slow, laborious, and expensive process. When you think of the printing press, one name immediately comes to mind: Johannes Gutenberg. Around 1440 in Germany, Gutenberg developed a printing press that used movable type. But like with paper, Gutenberg wasn't the first person to invent printing. Not by a long shot. Woodblock printing, where an entire page is carved into a block of wood, had been used in China since the 7th century. A Chinese artisan named Bi Sheng invented a system of movable type using baked clay characters way back in the 11th century. Later, Koreans developed a system of metal movable type, even printing a book called the Jikji in 1377, a full 78 years before Gutenberg's famous Bible. Let's get back to basics. Before you can have cities, empires, and information revolutions, you need one thing: a surplus of food. And the single most important invention for creating that surplus was the plow. The earliest plows were incredibly simple, little more than a sharpened stick or frame, known as an ard. They were developed in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt around 4000 BC. Who first had the idea to hitch a digging stick to an animal to make the work easier? It's a complete mystery. This was a monumental leap in thinking. It represented one of the first times humans harnessed animal power for a task other than transportation. Over the centuries, the plow evolved. The Romans added a coulter, a vertical blade to cut the sod, and later, in the Middle Ages, European farmers developed the heavy wheeled plow with a moldboard. The moldboard was the key upgrade. It was a curved metal plate that actually turned the soil over, burying weeds and aerating the soil. We live our lives by the clock and the calendar. We schedule meetings, celebrate birthdays, and plan our futures based on a shared understanding of time. The calendar is the framework that organizes our societies. But who invented it? Who was the first person to look up at the sky and decide to systematically track the cycles of the sun and moon to measure the passage of time? The answer, once again, is nobody we can name. Virtually every ancient civilization developed its own calendar system, and they did it independently. The Sumerians in Mesopotamia created a calendar based on the cycles of the moon, with 12 months of 29 or 30 days. The Mayans in Mesoamerica developed an incredibly complex and accurate set of interlocking calendars that tracked both solar and ritual cycles. These systems weren't the work of a single genius sitting under a tree. They were the result of generations of patient observation by anonymous priests, astronomers, and skywatchers. Let's scale down from the cosmic to something you could hold in your hand. It's small, simple, and so common that you probably have a few sitting in a junk drawer right now. The nail. Before the nail, construction was a complex business. Builders had to rely on intricate joinery, carving interlocking pieces of wood, or lashing things together with rope or leather. The first metal nails date back to ancient Egypt, over 3,400 years ago. But the Romans were the ones who really mastered nail production. Roman blacksmiths produced nails in huge quantities, and they were essential for building everything from forts and bridges to chariots and furniture. But who was the first blacksmith to figure out how to take a piece of wrought iron, heat it in a forge, and hammer it into a tapered shank with a flattened head? Who invented this incredibly useful little object? There's no record. If the nail held the wooden world together, another invention formed the very foundations of empire concrete. The Pantheon in Rome is particularly incredible. It features the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, and it was completed almost 2,000 years ago. It's still standing, perfectly intact. How did they do it? They had a secret recipe. Roman concrete was a mixture of volcanic ash called pozzolana, lime, and seawater, mixed with chunks of rock. This mixture triggered a chemical reaction that created an incredibly strong and durable material. In fact, modern research has shown that Roman concrete gets stronger over time, especially when exposed to seawater. The salt water seeps into tiny cracks and reacts with the pozzolana, forming new crystals that fill the gaps and reinforce the structure. It's a self-healing material. So, who was the genius who came up with this recipe? We have no idea. The recipe was likely a closely guarded state secret, passed down among imperial engineers. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the recipe for this high-quality concrete was lost for over 1,000 years. Finally, let's bring it to the modern era with an invention you are using this very second: the Internet. Unlike a nail or a wheel, the Internet is not a single thing. It's a complex, sprawling system of interconnected networks, protocols, and technologies. The story starts in the 1960s with the U.S. Department of Defense. They wanted a decentralized communication network that could survive a nuclear attack. This led to the creation of ARPANET, the precursor to the Internet. Then, in the 1970s, Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn developed the foundational protocols of the Internet TCP/IP, or Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol. This was a crucial step. TCP/IP is the common language that allows different computer networks to communicate with each other. In the 1980s and 90s, Tim Berners-Lee, working at CERN, invented the World Wide Web. He created HTTP, HTML, and the first web browser, making the internet accessible and user-friendly for the average person. So, is he the inventor? You could make a strong case for any of these people, and dozens more. You could point to the inventors of the modem, the Ethernet cable, or the domain name system. The truth is, the internet wasn't invented by one person. It was a collaborative creation, built layer by layer over decades by thousands of brilliant people, many of whom remain anonymous to the public. So there you have it. 10 inventions, 10 world changers, all born from the minds of people whose names are lost to history. From the wheel to the web, it's clear that progress isn't always driven by famous figures and headline-grabbing moments. More often, it's a slow, steady, and anonymous process. It's the farmer improving a plow, the blacksmith perfecting a nail, or the countless engineers building the silent infrastructure of our digital world. Their legacy isn't a name in a history book. It's the world we live in every single day. It kind of changes your perspective. The next time you drive a car, read a book, or check a map on your phone, maybe take a second to think about the long chain of unknown innovators who made that possible. If you found this journey into the world of anonymous genius as fascinating as I did, please do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to Unknown Facts for more deep dives like this one. It makes a huge difference. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.